Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. How's everybody this evening?
Cool.
Okay.
It's existing.
Great,
Great.
great, great, great. I hope everybody was practicing those questions I gave you guys. You know, this exam is, part of this exam is just practice, practice, practice. Anyway, any questions so far on what we've done so far? Nope.
Not as yet.
Great. I guess this evening we're going to start what we call portfolio management. Now, there was a young lady that sent me a message last week that talked about, and I said, I hear you guys keep referring to the manual, and I don't know if the manual I'm referring to would have been the manual that the Bahamas Institute of Financial Services would have given you for the course. Does everybody have that manual? Yes, no, maybe?
For module 5, yeah. If that's the same thing.
No, this module I'm teaching is module 4.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
yeah, because we have time value and we have portfolio management. So I'm assuming it's the same thing.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. They may have changed the manual from the manual I'm using. Okay, portfolio management. Fundamentals of portfolio management. Asset allocation is the process of deciding how to distribute an investor's wealth among different countries and asset classes for investment purposes. Okay. I am not going to sit here and read this thing to you. I'm going to tell you in general terms, and I like my classes to be more proactive and everybody getting involved. I think initially I told you at the very beginning that when you have discretionary funds that you have to invest, and what I mean by discretionary funds is after you've taken your income, deducted the expenses that you have to pay, what's left over is your surplus or your discretionary funds. It assumes that everybody pays their expenses, so these are things you gotta pay. BC, telephone, school, mortgage, and so forth. After you get that all out of the way, you deduct all your expenses. What you're left with is what in financial terms we call discretionary funds. And knowing you guys, I know that's always a surplus. Now you have to decide with these surplus funds, what am I going to do with it? I mean, obviously there's a portion of it that is going to be used maybe for host projects and so forth, but I'm hoping a portion of it is going to be being used for investment purposes to build your investment portfolio, okay? Now, when you begin to build your investment portfolio, you have to decide, how am I going to invest this money? Well, the top-down approach is, first of all, determining, A, how much funds do I have available? B, where am I going to place these funds? Am I going to place it in bonds, equity securities, mutual funds, or other types of investment? It may be property. But you have to determine how you're going to place those funds and what percentage are you going to place in each asset category. Now, a lot of other things go into determining exactly how you allocate these funds when you're getting ready for placing them in various asset groups. Chief among those, believe it or not, is what is your life cycle? What stage of your life cycle that you are in? Why do I say that? Just to give you an example, if it were me, a 25 to say 40-year-old individual with investment funds, the way I will tell them to structure their portfolio will be a lot different than I would tell a 50 to 60-year-old. Reason being, hypothetically or in general terms, a 25 to 40-year-old individual can take more risk than a 50 to 60-year-old. 25 to 45 has more time on their hand where they don't have a need for their investments to pay them back immediately, either in the form of interest or dividends. So those are the two things that they have. They have risk. They should have a greater tolerance of risk, and they should have a greater tolerance in terms of the investment taking time to bear fruit, as opposed to a 50 to 60-year-old who is now looking at retirement. Oh, the other thing I want to say about 25 to 40-year-old, they have a longer time. They're not going to be dependent on income from these investments because they should have a steady form of income in the form of employment. As opposed to a 50 to 60-year-old who is now heading towards retirement, I would tell them that they should now be either looking for their structure in terms of what percentage should be in fixed income or bonds versus equities should be different than the percentage allocated to those asset classes for 25 to 40-year-old. Take, for instance, I may tell a 25 to 40-year-old, put as much as 70% of your investment funds into equity and another 30% into bonds. For 50 to 60-year-old, it will be totally reversed because they now need to start cashing out of their equities unless those equities are from what they call blue chip companies that has a record of paying in uninterrupted dividend. I won't put them in a growth company because most growth companies initially do not pay dividends for a very long time. So that's not going to be good for them because they are closer to needing their investments or the investment income earned to replace their traditional employment investment. So I would then tell them maybe 70% of your portfolio should be in fixed interest, with the other 30% being in equities, and equities issued by companies that has a track record of uninterrupted dividends. Okay? So there's a category that talks about investor life cycle. And they go on insurance, and they start with insurance. Life insurance should be a component of any financial plan. Life insurance protects loved ones against financial hardship should death occur before our financial goals are met. And they go on to give all the benefits of, of life insurance, because if something happens to you, you want to make sure that the loved ones you leave behind they may benefit from it, and or not only in terms of having enough funds, I don't mean to sound morbid, to bury you, but having something else, a life insurance also protects against, if you have a mortgage, then the life insurance can be cashed in to pay the mortgage, because most life insurances, while you have a mortgage, the beneficiary is normally the financial institution lending it. So it will clear that major investment so that your loved ones you left behind isn't saddled with paying off that mortgage. You also have term life. There are various categories of insurances, and you have to choose one that fits you. The next category is cash reserve, having liquidity. Emergencies, job layoffs, and unforeseen expenses happen, and good investment opportunities emerge. It is important to have a cash reserve to help meet these occasions. In other words, let's just say, go back to the example, the 25 to 30-year-old, I may tell them, okay, instead of 70% in equities and 30 in bonds, save some to have cash, maybe in CDs, whatever, or so forth, because emergencies happen. You need some type of liquidity. Most experts recommend a cash reserve equal to about 6 months living expenses. That's so important, I can repeat it again. Most experts recommend a cash reserve equal to about 6 months living expenses. I'm going to go one step further. COVID-19 has showed us that may even need to be increased to 12 months. Because believe it or not, we are approaching March, will mark the 1-year anniversary since the first case of COVID-19 was discovered in the Bahamas. Since that time, I mean, every time you read the news or so forth, you heard about downsizing, job layoffs, and so forth like that, particularly in the tourism and tourist-related industries. Okay? Do you see in the manual or the handouts that you have, a graph at the bottom of page 3? Everybody sees that? It gives you a hypothetical strategy in terms of where you should be, or what most people go through based upon what age they are. It starts out like from about 25 to 45. You're in what they call financial terms the accumulation phase. Long-term retirement, children's college fund needs, short-term house and car. That's what you're accumulating assets during this time. From about 45 to about 65, you're in the consolidation phase. Again, long-term retirement, short-term vacations, children's college needs. These are all major considerations, even in the consolidation phase. Then from about 65 to 85, you go into what they call the spending or the gifting phase. And you switch from long-term retirement to long-term estate planning, short-term lifestyle needs and gifts. It goes on to explain each one of these categories. Accumulation phase. Individuals in this phase are attempting to accumulate assets to satisfy fairly immediate needs. For example, a down payment for a house, or longer-term goals, children's college education, retirement. Typically, their net worth is small, and debt from car loans or their own past college loans may be heavy. As a result of their usually long investment time horizon and their future earning ability, individuals in the accumulation phase are willing to make relatively high-risk investments in the hopes of making above average nominal returns over time. The consolidation phase. Individuals in the consolidation phase are typically past the midpoint of their careers, have paid off much or all of their outstanding debts, and perhaps have paid or have the assets to pay their children's college bills. Earnings exceed expenses, so the excess can be invested to provide for your future retirement or estate planning needs. The typical investment horizon for this phase is still long, 20 to 30 years. So moderately high-risk investments are attractive. At the same time, because individuals in this phase are concerned about capital preservation, they do not want to take high-risk opportunities that may put their current nest egg in jeopardy. Spending phase. The spending phase typically begins when individuals retire. Living expenses are covered by income from prior investments, including employer pension plans. Because their earning years have concluded, they seek greater protection of their capital. At the same time, they must balance their desire to preserve the nominal value of their savings due to inflation. Gifting phase. The gifting phase is similar to and may be concurrent with the spending phase. In this stage, individuals believe they have sufficient income and assets to cover their expenses while maintaining a reserve for uncertainties. Excess assets can be used to provide financial assistance to relatives or friends, to establish charitable trusts, or to fund trusts as an estate planning tool. Any questions on what we've covered so far?
How does that?
Joseph, is Adley you there?
Yes, sir, right here.
What phase you in?
What phase I in?
Yes.
I'm in the accumulation phase.
Okay, great. Why do you define yourself as being in the accumulation phase?
Because right now, I have some short-term goals of, I will have a car, of obtaining a house and saving towards retirement, and
Okay, good stuff, Joseph. I mean, but with this thing, you also understand that you will sometime be transitioning into the next phase.
Yes, of course.
Okay, great, fantastic. Clamia.
Good night.
Good night, Clamia. Thank you for joining us. Clamia, what phase are you in?
I would also be in the accumulation phase, preparing for a home.
Okay.
on retirement, but no children needs as yet.
Clemia, have you begun an investment portfolio?
No,
That's fine. Okay. Don't sleep on it. Okay. I mean, so please.
no, I'm not
Melissa.
sleeping on it.
Okay, fair enough. Melissa, Ms. Dorset.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing? How you doing, ma'am? Good evening.
Good evening. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Melissa, what phase are you in and why?
At this point, because I put my family first, so I'm at this point where now I'm trying to, I'm in the accumulation phase. I'm thinking right now between the ages of 40 and 60, I don't want to rely on the government pension. So I'm building right now, and I'm doing okay with 3 savings, and I'm living frugal now despite the economy. So I'm in the accumulating phase, and the part, even with this certification, this is a part of it, like you say, to carry me to another phase.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
Mr. Bethel. Or Mr. Bethel. Good evening, Mr. Bethel. Mr. Bethel being bashful this evening. Ms. McDonald.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. What phase are you in, Ms. McDonald?
I am currently in the accumulation phase
Mhm.
as I am only 24. Well, I'll be 25 this year.
Understood. Understood.
And my network is relatively small. I am actually saving up towards a home.
Okay.
However, that home is more like a triplex. And
I mean,
actually,
it's an income producing asset.
yes, sir. And I am actually very much willing to make high risk investments in hopes to make above average or um to make pretty good returns.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Mr. McKinney, you've been awfully quiet this evening.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, sir?
Can't complain.
Thank you for joining us. Mr. McKinney, what phase are you in?
As with the majority of the group, I'm also in the accumulation phase. Still in the process of growing my net worth. I have a large debt called a mortgage that I need to get out of. Kids and everything else. So still trying to grow the asset and the network. So yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Chanel.
Hi,
Hi. How are you this evening?
I am good.
Okay. What
How are
phase?
you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for asking. What phase are you in?
I am with the crew. Accumulation. That being based on my next step would be home and more investments.
Excellent. Excellent. Is it Pantrella?
Patronal.
Patronal.
Patronel. Are you there?
I am right here.
Okay. Patronel. What phase are you in?
I too am in the accumulation phase.
Okay.
I have a car in the process of building. Um, I work, so I'm saving for retirement.
Mhm.
No kids yet, but
Okay.
like you said, I guess we're in the accumulation phase, but still transitioning into another phase
Understood.
eventually.
Understood. There is someone here that has a picture of the San Francisco Bridge. Who is that? Hi. Uh, we can't hear you with the mask on. Oh, they logged out.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Angela.
Wow. I didn't realize I had the video on.
Yeah, I see you all about the place. You've been in San Francisco, eh?
Well, a few places.
Angelica, what's that?
Hi. I think I'm in between. Accumulating. I think that's what they were saying. Accumulative.
Right. Okay, look like we having a little bit problem with your connection, Angelica. You may be in a bad spot. Okay, but the gist of it is that everybody, obviously you guys understand it, and a couple of observations. Probably during the accumulation and transitioning into the consolidation phase, the largest asset you're gonna have is your home and your mortgage. That's probably for everybody. Unless you are one of those fortunate ones where somebody gifted you a house through inheritance. So, I mean, persevere through that mortgage, that will turn into an asset. And with that asset, you also, that should be, it is an investment, believe it or not. So as soon as you buy a home or build a home, you are already investing, because hopefully the market value of your investment will continue to go up. So please persevere through that. It just get hard sometimes. I quite understand that. But also be aware that every now and again, you have to take some stock and make sure that you are on track to transition into the other phases in a timely manner. Another piece of advice I will give you, as I gave to you at the very beginning of this course, or when I started teaching Module 4 or coaching Module 4, if you have a spouse, make sure that they are involved too. All right. Portfolio.
Sorry, you said if we have, you could repeat that, sorry.
If you have a spouse.
Oh, spouse.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't say significant other. If you have a spouse, please make sure that they are involved too, because this whole thing is a team play effort. If you have a spouse. Okay. All right, I'm going to go on to the portfolio management process. The process of managing an investment portfolio never stops. The process of managing an investment portfolio never stops. The process of managing an investment portfolio never stops. Once the funds are initially invested according to the plan, the railway begins in monitoring and updating the status of the portfolio and the investor's needs. Mr. Rithman, remember at the beginning of the course when I started talking about government securities? And you had said that one of the drawbacks of investing in government securities is that the central bank doesn't automatically reinvest your interest. You remember that? Mr.
Yes,
McKinney?
sir. I remember.
And this fits into that category. They will send the interest to your bank account. It is up to you to reinvest the interest, thereby gaining the effect of the compound interest. Please understand this. I have a little mantra that I go by. And I know everybody is all caught up in their careers and everything like that. Please hear my little voice in the back of your mind saying, nobody business more important than your business.
Makes sense.
Give the man you're working for his fair due. Always take that time to take care of your business. Every time I sit down and talk to people, do you have a budget or prepare this budget? Oh, Miss Donna, that is be so busy at work. That's a dumb answer. Nobody business more important than your business, your financial business. The process of investment seeks to peer into the future and determine strategies that offer the best possibility of meeting the policy statement guidelines. First of all, you come up with an investment policy. That's when you're deciding what I am going to be, what are my goals, what are my objectives, what are my investment objectives. Okay, now once you have that policy set, then you have to go forward and determine what is the strategy I am going to follow to achieve these policies or goals. In the second step of portfolio management process, the manager should study current financial and economic conditions and forecast future trends. The investor's needs are reflected in the policy statement, and financial market expectations will jointly determine investment strategy. Okay? Like, take for instance, now you have a policy, I want to own my home or so forth like that. You look at the environment that we are in. Then you come up with your strategy on how best to achieve it. Let me throw a question out there. Given the current, what would you guys deem as our current financial environment here in the Bahamas?
This is a good time for investment if you have the residual funds. It's a good opportunity. A lot of people talk about owning homes. I hate to say it this way, but there are going to be some opportunities where you can buy some homes at a significantly discounted rate, whether repossessed or not. So yeah, it's a buyer's market.
Anyone
if you have the funds.
Anybody else want to contribute? Now come on now, I know y'all ain't bashful, man. What type of economic environment we in right now in the Bahamas?
Right now, everybody trying to own their business.
They trying to own their business?
Yeah, they opening up businesses. A lot of people right now in the economy are doing things for themselves. They realizing that making their own money is much better.
Why would they want to do that in this challenging economic time?
You can look at it from different avenue. Like right now, even down to the government, a lot of only persons that are getting NIB are persons that worked and had enough contribution. Persons who are going to Red Cross or Salvation Army or wherever else, charity event that is assisting people, they are only, from stories I've heard, they're giving them like $20 coupon, $30 coupon. So all of that is driving their energy to a point where, hey, I got to get up and do something. Kids need to eat, blah, blah, blah. Bills still need to be paid. You still got to pay rent and stuff like that. So their energy are forced to get up and do something.
Thank you. I mean, very astute. Thank you for that observation. Chanel, what would you say our environment is? Now remember now, y'all may be financial planners. You got a client coming to you. What you can tell them what the current economic environment is? Come on, Chanel.
Well, I would say, I think in the Bahamas, it can be a favorable one in that, I mean, we are experiencing challenges. I'm going to overlook that, but it still can be favorable. Depends on how you work with it based on the opportunities that are available. So for investors, I think, like Vitamin said, it's a good time to get in on those deals that can possibly you can possibly gain an advantage on with real estate, because persons like I think it was Melissa who said that persons are in need of cash, and so to survive or to kind of pull through, so persons are going to be more leaning towards selling at a lower or discounted rate.
I have a friend that's a manager at the bank, and from his aspect, the economy is bad. They don't only certain people, certain companies are benefiting from what's happening right now. Again, there's still a separation of the wealthy people versus the unwealthy people. And we're in a pandemic, and it's still reflecting strong that there's a silver lining between the gold fence over there and the bronze fence over here. And, you know, the government isn't rectifying this at this time. And, you know,
Melissa, you're correct though. It is the economy is tough, but like you say that there's always opportunity and chaos, and right now it's chaotic. So if someone is taking the time, like you mentioned earlier, that a lot of people are forced to find ways to do their own thing, and if the environment was stable, a lot of them wouldn't take the time or put in the effort to go and look at creating a business. So there's an opportunity for growth in certain environments. And if you are diligent and looking for certain opportunities, you could find it. There's always a niche. It's harder sometimes, especially like now, but it's always a niche.
Melissa, what do you have in response to that?
say it again.
What would your response to Mr. McKinney be?
I only heard the last leg, but there are opportunities in this economic time. There are opportunities, but only we go back to only the strong survive, survival of the fittest right now. But what I'm saying also is the government, I feel as if the government has a say in this, you know, because me and my fiance just drove and we was like, Wassily, construction companies getting all these major construction jobs. And I know a lot of middle class contractors that were actually getting contracts from the government that are you know, adequate enough to do certain jobs. So I'm saying, like, there are choices, but the right choices that aren't being made. And because of that, people are taking matters in their own hands. They have children, they have their mortgages to pay. They have the banks are still working with persons, but the banks still require you to even just bring something, even if it's 1/3 of your loan, whatever. They know the economy is bad, but it's some people are taking advantage of it. Who have it, like they say, like who have it. Some people are investing, buying properties, buying dilapidated houses. People are in need for cash, so they selling their homes and properties for a cheaper price. Some people are making and some people aren't. But now you could really, really, really see what has been happening for many years.
Meaning, I'm not following you. What has been happening for many years?
What has been happening for many years is that the rich stay richer, stay rich, and the poor stay poor because of decision making, and it stem from the high end that trickles down. Let me give you an example. When we go to certain areas, even as simple as certain areas in our country, out west or out east, but I'll basically say out west, the landscape out there is very beautiful. When you come in town, the landscaping is very poor. The trees are very rich. The trees even look rich and nourished and well taken care of. If you drive in local areas, the trees look in the limb and limb. You can see the dust on the trees. It's very ridiculous. So our government basically is showing us right in our face how he feels about us, or how he feels about his what you call us, citizens of the country. And but then see, still now evolve, like how I've been thinking all my life that hey, I can be on that side of the fence. I don't want to be on that side because I see how they are being treated.
What could get you to that side of the fence?
What got me?
No.
Networking, being in the right circle, hanging in certain areas, having certain type of friends, and going to certain organizations. It's like you have to go where they hang, and you have to be involved. You have to make friends, and then it starts within your
When you go where they hang, right? What, they can give you money? I mean, what
No,
you
it's a lifestyle. Not everything is money, but it's a lifestyle. When you adopt that lifestyle, and let me tell you something, like one of my friends, and this was many years ago, he's a hot F&M. And I remember one time I sit right in his office, just an example. He said, man, listen, ain't no sales come in. He's talking to someone in the government office now. He said, no sales coming. I can't even pay my employees, blah, 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 because he sells printing papers. His friend in the government office say, man, send an invoice. So they look out for each other in that circle. So not everything is money hand into your hand, but it's like a favor. It's like, hey, I'm not going to let you fall. So it's a lifestyle. When you when you're around a certain circle, I'm not going to let you fall. Versus on the other hand, if the dog crossed the road, you getting snitched for what? You talking, people gossiping. It's a whole different culture.
Okay.
It's a whole different culture.
Melissa, what I'm trying to get out of you is that you said something, it's been happening for a long time. I agree with you. But what has been happening for a long time is that a lot of us have not practiced proper financial planning. See, we can blame the government. The government can only do so much. Any government that comes in could only do so much.
You can't say that. You can't say that because the House of Assembly is conducting these rules that only favorable.
I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm not even talking about it. Any government can only do so much. But every individual has to take responsibility for their own welfare. I was hoping you were saying that by hanging in another type of circle, you would then learn from them some of the strategies that they employed. And I'm not talking about the F&M looking out for my boy or anything like that. I'm talking about managing your financial affairs.
Even if me being an entrepreneur and I manage my financial affairs of 2 years, the bank still is going to give me a hard time versus a white man in a suit could walk in with a portfolio and he would cross his leg and they would say,
Melissa, stop that. This class ain't about that. I'm sorry, okay?
My apologies.
What I'm trying to convey to you guys is that, yes, there is, I will tell you about 85% of the people out there don't practice financial planning, proper financial planning. Then you got the 15% that do. And as Mr. McKinney says, it's going to be the 15% who is going to be in a position when opportunities arise to take advantage of it. And it's through proper financial planning. Melissa, me and my brother always have this argument all day long. All day long. Oh, the government got to do this, the government got to do this. Well, crazy, man. Brother, the government ain't your parent. You have to take responsibility for your financial planning. That's the only point I'm trying to make, Melissa. You are entirely entitled to your opinion on what government should or should not do. That's not my concern. I am after emphasizing the fact that you have to take responsibility for your financial planning. Ergo, why are you in this class? You have to, every individual, every citizen has a responsibility to take advantage and to be able to take care of themselves and theirs. Events happen in your life. But a part of it is you got to plan for some of them events. So that's the only point I'm trying to make. And I am glad when I asked you, like, what is the state of the economy? Do you know the majority of yours, I think Mr. McKinney and Chanel, the answers were, it wasn't like the chicken running around, oh, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. You guys said, and I paraphrase what you said, I put it, in adversity, you have to look for the advantage. During times of adversity, you need to look for advantage. Believe you me, whenever there's an adverse time in any economy, there are people who are making money.
By the boatloads.
Well, there are people who are making money because they put themselves in a position where, you know, where they have cash reserves. Remember we talked about that earlier? Where through proper financial planning and discipline, they are in a position to take advantage when opportunities arise during adverse times. Hey, I'm just as empathetic as the guy out there who loses his house for some reason or has to liquidate some of his assets. I am just as empathetic as everybody else. But the fact of the matter is that will happen. You have to decide, as Ms. Dorset said, which side of the fence you want to be on. Okay. The third step of the portfolio management process is to construct the portfolio. So you've gotten your policy, you looked at the investment environment, you've decided basically what type of environment we're in. Now you're going to construct the portfolio. With the investor's policy statement and financial market forecast as input, the advisors implement the investment strategy and determine how to allocate available funds across different countries, asset classes, and securities. This involves constructing a portfolio that will minimize the investor's risk while meeting the needs specified in the policy statement. The fourth step in the portfolio management process is the continual monitoring of the investor's needs and capital market conditions. And when necessary, updating the policy statement. Based upon all of this, the investment strategy is modified accordingly. Very, very powerful portfolio. As it stated earlier, the process of managing an investment portfolio never stops. Like it's a continual process because conditions change, your needs change, your income changes, and as all of these things happen, you are going to have to modify your portfolio. A component of the monitoring process is to evaluate a portfolio's performance and compare the relative results to the expectation and requirements listed in the portfolio statement. So you have a statement. You may have a statement, any investment I get involved with, got to give me a 15% return. Now, after you've structured your portfolio and you're continually monitoring it, the next step is to measure the performance of your portfolio and determine, is my portfolio meeting my policy requirements? If not, then you got to restructure it. A policy statement is a roadmap that guides the investment process. Constructing a policy statement is an invaluable planning tool that will help the investor understand his or her needs better, as well as assist an advisor or portfolio manager in managing a client's funds. While it does not guarantee investment success, a policy statement will provide discipline for the investment process and reduce the possibility of making hasty, inappropriate decisions. There are two important reasons for constructing a policy statement. First, it helps the investor decide on realistic investment goals after learning about the financial markets and the risk of investing. Second, it creates a standard by which to judge the performance of the portfolio manager. An important purpose of writing a policy statement is to help investors understand their own needs, objectives, and investment constraints. As part of this, investors need to learn about financial markets and the risks of investing. This background will help prevent them from making inappropriate investment decisions in the future and will increase the possibility that they will satisfy their specific, measurable financial goals. Thus, the policy statement helps the investor to specify realistic goals and become more informed about the risks and costs of investing. Anybody got any questions, observations, comments? On page 6, there is a flow diagram that sort of summarizes everything that was said. Very helpful. Now they go on to designing an investment policy. The investment policy contains the client's objectives and constraints, and the guidelines that the investment manager must follow. Mr. Adel, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Let's just say you're sitting down now to construct your portfolio.
My own portfolio.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
What would be one of your policies you would incorporate in it?
One of my policies I would incorporate for my own portfolio.
Excuse me, yes, sir. Just give me a policy statement or objective.
Well, my one of my objectives for my portfolio, I would want it to be diverse.
Okay.
So maybe I would say I would want to most of my investments to be heavily within real estate.
Okay.
It means in terms of stuff like that.
Yeah. This your investment. You structuring your portfolio, sir.
Okay.
You tell me what it is you want to achieve.
Right. I would probably have because of my age, I would suggest that I probably could take on some more risks, so I'd have a higher risk ceiling.
Okay.
So I guess things like that.
You've talked about diversity. You want a diverse portfolio.
Yes, sir.
You don't mind taking on high risk.
No.
And I would think by taking on higher risks, you want to maximize your return.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
The higher the risk, the higher the return. Right?
Right.
So that's two policy statements: diversification and high risk. No, and better than average return with the view of taking on higher than average risk. Yeah?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Good. Clemia, what would be one of your policy statements? Or a couple of your policy statements in structuring your portfolio?
If I speak about right now, I'd want my focus to be short term. Anything I could get quickly.
Okay.
I want it now. Why? Being I feel as though if I can make more money now, I can then secure the bag to invest for the long term. So I want anything that's going to bring me quick returns.
With the quick return, are you willing to take higher than average risk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that over about a year or two. I'll take the risk. I was actually watching, I think it was Good Morning America this morning, and they were talking about what is it? The GameStop, how they basically took over the market, and persons had to take that risk. But now I think it's a good time to come out of that because they what do they call? They did a short sell where the big boys, they took over the big boys. So now they did a $300 increase. So that was a risk that they took, but it's winning for them and the investors. So risk like that, I'm willing to take on right now, or I would be willing.
Okay, fair enough. And you said this was in the what industry? The games?
The name of the company was GameStop.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they were selling at I think $20 per share, and now it's 347, something about that. Yeah.
Wow.
They made headlines with that news. Yeah. the big boys are trying to take them out, and I can't remember exactly what they did to then turn it around.
Wow.
hmm So that has a lot of persons investing in them right now. So I would take that kind of risk right now and then get out. So I'll take a lot of high risk right now.
Okay, any other policy other than just you would take high risk for higher returns?
Mm, just for at the moment, I'll go with that.
Okay, fair enough.
hmm
I always get this young lady name wrong. I can get it before we conclude. Patronel?
Patronel.
Patronel.
Mm-hmm.
What would be some of your, give me 2 policies that you would incorporate in structuring your portfolio? 2 of them.
I would do, I would want low risk, between low and medium risk.
Uh-huh.
Um, I also would play with the time. I would want some that mature further away, let's say 30 years or so, and then, but you also want some liquidity. So that's 3 I give you.
Yeah, that's good. That's
You
good. You got more.
you want, in the case, well, with the liquidity, how I would be thinking of it, in the case that something happens, you know, emergencies happen. I want to be able to sell something, not sell off the whole portfolio, but sell off something, um, and be able to get some funds.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input.
Okay.
Miss McDonald, you've been awfully quiet today.
So I've noticed, yes, sir.
Yeah. You've been taking a free ride today.
I wouldn't say free ride.
Okay, all right. Give me a couple of policy statements or objectives when you sit down to structure your portfolio.
When I sit down and structure my portfolio, honestly, I've actually been digging what Patronel have been saying, but more specifically with numbers. I've actually been doing this while I was listening to everybody. 50%, I would actually have my portfolio split up in half. 50% would be the low risk, and the other 50% would be the above average or high, where I can afford to go ahead and take that risk and still have a quick turnover and that I will be getting monies back, which could be in marketable securities or equity in some sort. My low risk I would be considering in some type of bonds, whereas I can always get monies coming in, and even if it other things have matured later on down the line, I would still actually have that. And most definitely go more towards anything that is more of a higher return. So I'll be leaning more towards my high risk, but definitely not put my whole plan inside of the high risk. So let's say I'm gonna split it up 50-50 on for both, and to maximize my returns for half, the other one just to make sure that I stay secured.
Okay, so one of your objectives will be to create a balanced portfolio in the sense of risk.
Yes.
Okay, fine. That's a good strategy. I mean, by all means. Clemia, you got us yet? Yes, Clemia wanted quick.
Yeah, I taking the high risk.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. Mr. McKinney, talk to me.
I like the approach that Miss McDonald had about it being balanced between both low, medium, and high risk. the only thing I would do different for me would be, I would also want to diversify it across various industries, whether it's real estate or security, and probably as well as the maturing. So I would want some short-term investment as well as maybe a significant amount in long-term, but I would want some short-term investment as well. So a nice, well-balanced portfolio.
Fantastic. Guys, those are very, very good answers. And thank you very much for your input. Now, let's read what the book has to say about investment objectives or policies. Objectives often receive the most attention from investors at the expense of the other policy considerations. Objectives are determined from a thorough discussion with and knowledge of the client's needs, preferences, and resources. Major considerations are return. In discussion with the manager, the client must determine whether they prefer a strategy of return maximization, where assets are invested to make the greatest return possible while staying within the risk tolerance level or whatever a required minimum return with certainty is preferable. Generating only that much return with the emphasis on risk reduction. In addition, the manager should be conscious of the proportion of current income versus capital gains in light of the client's tax position and needs, as well as the split between current income received as interest versus current income received as dividends. Excuse me. Risk. There are many ways to assess the risk tolerance of a particular investor, from the very rudimentary to the very sophisticated. Each has its value in measuring what degree of risk the client is prepared to take and is a vital element in the ultimate design of the portfolio, as it will govern the selection of securities to be included. It is important to recognize the difference between the risk of an individual security and the risk of the portfolio as a whole. Because the risk of a portfolio is less than the average risk of its holdings, the client's risk tolerance should be matched to the risk of the overall portfolio and not to the risk of each security. Does everybody understand what that means? In fact, you guys hit upon it. What it says is that, Mr. Adderley, by constructing your portfolio over a wider assortment of investments, by default, you are reducing your risk, because a portfolio has less risk than an individual stock. That's what you were hinting at, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, investing when you said diversification, that's what you were hinting at. So when you construct a portfolio by its nature is geared towards risk reduction, as opposed to taking all your money. I mean, you could have a portfolio of one stock, but that's a very, very high risk portfolio. So risk plays a very important part in structuring a portfolio. Inflation. Although most retail clients will need some degree of inflation protection, the extent will vary. A retired person with a long-term horizon and the goal of using the portfolio to generate income will be very concerned about the purchasing power of the cash flow from the portfolio. Another person using short-term trading strategies and interested in maximization of capital gains may concentrate less on this particular factor. It is important to remember that there are no certainties with a client. Just because a client is a trader and is of a young age does not automatically mean they are not concerned about inflation. Careful listening and discussion with the client should always replace assumptions and generalities based on such things as age and wealth. Excuse me 1 second. I gotta do something to cut down on some of my at-home background noise. Okay. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, just a little bit more faint, but yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I had to put on the speakers to try to cut down some of the background noise. Time horizon. A major factor in the design of a good portfolio is how well it reflects the time of its goals. Fundamentally, the time horizon is the period of time from the present until the next major change in the client's circumstances. In other words, just because a client is 25 years of age and normal retirement is at age 60 does not necessarily mean their time horizon is 35 years. Clients go through various events in their life, each of which can represent a time horizon and a need for a complete rebalancing of their portfolio. For example, finishing university, planning for a career change, the birth of a child, the purchase of a home, and many other events besides retirement represents the end of one time horizon and the beginning of a new one. While some major events in a client's life are not able to be predicted, such as a serious health problem or loss of employment, a client's time horizon should still be the period of time from the present to the next major expected change in circumstance. Liquidity. Liquidity can have several meanings, including the net working capital of a business and the ability to sell a security quickly without a significant sacrifice in price. In portfolio management, liquidity means the amount of cash and near cash in the portfolio. Taxation. An investor's marginal tax rate will dictate, in part, the proportion of income which should be received as dividends versus income, and therefore, in part, the proportion invested in preferred shares versus other fixed income securities such as bonds. Taxation levels and rates will also guide the choice of tax advantaged securities. We talk about market timing and other. Now, I intentionally read through all of that because that is very important in understanding structuring a portfolio. Any questions or comments?
What is a tax advantage security?
Well, take for instance, and you got to remember a lot of this course is primarily US and UK based, okay, where they have a very robust tax environment. Take for instance, you in the US, you have both federal and state taxes, right? In other words, the federal government charges you a tax. And on top of that, the state in which you live can charge you a tax on top of the government taxes, right?
Okay.
Your working income in the US is taxed at both the federal and the state level. You realize that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you buy certain types of securities, take for instance, if you buy a government securities in the US, right? A government security, the income on that government securities is taxed at the federal level, but it is exempt from state taxation.
Okay, I understand.
So that is what you call a taxed advantage security. The income you earn on a normal bond or a stock will be taxed at both the state, the federal and the state level. There are certain types of bonds that are issued by a state. Take, for instance, a state is issuing bonds because it has to do a revamp of its entire sewerage system in the state. That bond can be taxed at the state level, but not at the federal level. So that's the reverse of the government security. Okay, so that's what you call taxed advantage securities. Good question. Any other questions or comments? Okay, constraints. Constraints provide some discipline in the fulfillment of a client's objectives. Constraints, which may loosely be defined as those items which may hinder or prevent the investment manager from satisfying the client's objectives, are often not given the importance they deserve in the policy formation process. Perhaps this is because objectives are a more comforting concept to dwell on than the discipline of constraints. Possible constraints include legal, moral or ethical, emotions, investment knowledge, willingness to take risks, ability to take risks, and there are others. I just hit the high points. You guys can read what they are, but there are constraints. Like many people, how many times have you all heard young people sit down and say, I want to own my home by 40. What's a major constraint there?
Much.
Pardon me? Hello?
somebody say something because I got these speakerphones on and I don't know if you guys can hear me.
We could hear you was asking the question and you just stopped.
Yeah, okay. A client comes to you and sits down. It's a young client, they're maybe 25 years old. They come and tell you, you ask them what one of your major objectives is. I want to own my home by 40. What you would think would be a major constraint for that person?
A constraint? I don't know, maybe the time, because it's extremely time sensitive. You have a limited amount of time to work with for them to own their home.
And what goes hand in hand with that time constraint?
Emotion,
No,
no?
their
Income
finance.
level.
That finance,
Ah. Okay. You hear that so often. People sitting down when they shooting the breeze. I want to own my own by 40.
that's a regular goal.
Yeah, but is it realistic? That's when you sit down and do an analysis of a client. Well, yeah, okay. I am on the same page with you, and it's an aggressive strategy. However, one of the constraints I could see is that your income level. I see sometimes you have to coach these people into getting into a more realistic frame of mind sometimes. All right, but I won't touch that on that. I mean, just understand that when you're doing objectives and so forth, it has to be coupled with what are some of the constraints that you may have in meeting these objectives. Major investment objectives. Having discovered the client's objectives and constraints, the next step in designing an investment portfolio is to summarize this information in terms of the three major objectives of income, capital gains, and preservation of capital. It is these major objectives that will help determine the appropriate asset allocation for that client. Preservation of capital. One major objective is to have some assurance that the initial capital invested will largely remain intact. If this is the main concern among the three objectives, the client is effectively saying that regardless of whether a small, large, or nil return is generated on the capital, the manager should try to avoid erosion of the amount initially invested. Let's go back to what Chanel said when I asked her to list, give me two policy objectives. She says that she wanted quick. She don't mind high. She don't mind absorbing the risk for higher return. Sounds good. Chanel, tell me what may be the downside of your objective there.
I think that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay, she wanted fast, short
Yeah.
term, fast. What's one of the downsides of that strategy?
It's very risky. I could lose all my monies.
Okay, once you understand that, it opens you up for the possibility of the erosion of your principal.
Mm-hmm.
The manager should clarify if the portfolio hold on. A large amount of nerve. This objective is expressed in constant dollars. The manager should clarify if the portfolio is to cover at least the impact of inflation. There is one simple strategy to make the preservation of an investor's principal fairly certain. Assume an account size of $1 million and a T-bill rate of approximately 5%. Roughly 950,000 can be invested in T-bills, which are considered risk-free and which will mature in 1 year's time at 100,000, or what they should say is at 100,000 or 1 million, restoring the principal amount. That's a misprint. The other 50,000 can be invested in some other venture, even a speculative one. And even if the full 7,000 is lost completely, the investor will receive their principal back. Does everyone understand that? Basically, what it's saying is, if you are concerned about preservation of capital, you look for the least riskiest investments to participate in. Most times, the least riskiest investment is government issued securities. They may not have the highest return, just how I spoke with Clemia. One of her downsides of a high risk portfolio is erosion of principal. The downside of a preservation of principal portfolio is that you can give up some return. You ain't gonna get the highest return in the market. Income. This major objective refers to the regular series of cash flows from a portfolio, whether in the form of dividends, interest, or some other form, and is a broader definition than the basic minimum income referred to as a constraint. The taxation of dividends and interest income will be a major determinant of the split between incomes received from debt or equity securities. This split is decided at the time the asset mix is set. Income is influenced by return, risk, inflation, and basic minimum income, among others. Capital gains is a major objective that capital gains is a return related to increase in capital due to the sale proceeds being higher than the cost basis. That is, selling something for more than it costs. However, the emphasis is on security selection and market timing, and generally is a trade-off against preservation of capital. Capital gains is a major objective that includes risk, return, market timing, and emotional consideration, as well as others. Investment policy statement. Ideally, the objectives and constraints, and perhaps even the manager's style, are written down in a formal document called an investment policy statement. This document forms the basis for the agreement between the manager and the client, and is in effect the manager's job description. Policy statements can be either elaborate or quite simple, but most cover the objective and constraints of a portfolio, a list of acceptable securities, and a list of prohibited securities, as well as the method to be used for performance appraisal. Setting the asset mix. The next step in the asset allocation process is to determine the appropriate balance among the selected asset classes. Using only cash, fixed income, and equity asset classes, the following are some examples of asset mixes determined by client risk tolerance and investment goals. Wealth conservation. Investors want to minimize their risk of loss. This is a strategy for strongly risk-averse investors or for funds needed in the short run. Do you guys have this open? This is a very important part of this. You all see the diagram?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You see how strongly in a wealth conservation, how strongly skewed the asset mix is to fixed income versus equities versus ultra short fixed income. This is wealth management. Or wealth conservation. Income, a fairly conservative portfolio with emphasis on fixed income securities with a little risk for a slightly higher return. Here, you get more income. The percentage makeup begins to change. Instead of having 70% in fixed income, you now have 58%. Equities have been boosted to 30% from 15%. Ultra short income has gone down from 15 to 12%. Balanced growth. A portfolio with approximately an even mix of riskier assets and fixed income securities. The investor is looking for some capital gain and income generation. Here you see the balance. I think it was Ms. Dorset, you came up with a mix, right? A 50-50 split, and Mr. McKinney agreed with that, right?
Say that again.
When I was asking you about your policy, what would be one of the policies or strategies you would employ? And you would say a 50-50 split in terms of risk, low risk versus high risk, right? I think it was
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I right here, yeah.
Okay, so here it is. This is a balance. Remember I told you balancing the risk. Here is what they call a balanced growth. Equities have gone up to 45%, fixed income is 45%, and ultra short fixed income is 10%. Market growth. Here, this is an aggressive one. While liquidity is still a factor, these investors are looking to benefit to a greater extent from equity market growth. There you see where equities have gone up to 60%, fixed income has declined to 35%, ultra short fixed income is down to 5%. Opportunistic growth, disclaimer. The primary objective for these investors is capital gains with income generated as a secondary objective. You see, most of this portfolio is in equities, and they're probably in growth type equities. Oh no, Clemia, this may be your portfolio here. Aggressive growth. This strategy is for very aggressive investors whose only concern is long-term capital gains. 99% of it is in equities. The importance of asset allocation. A major reason why investors develop policy statements is to determine an overall investment strategy. The policy statement provides a guideline as to the asset classes to include and the relative proportions of the investor's funds to invest in each class. How the investor divides funds into different asset classes is the process of asset allocation. The asset allocation noted above have ranges within which the investment manager can allocate the portfolio's assets within a given asset class. These ranges allow the investment manager to actively manage the portfolio while maintaining the client's asset allocation strategy. Okay, that's portfolio management. We're gonna stop here tonight because the next one is basics of demand and supply. We get into a little bit of economics here. Yeah, this is economics here. And then we go into equity valuation, and I don't want to go into that right now because this is a lot of information to absorb. I'm just taking. All right, any questions on what we covered tonight?
No, sir, nothing at all for me.
Was it clear?
Yeah, it was clear.
Yeah.
I have a question, not for tonight's class though. I was reviewing the time and money class.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be a need for us to know how to calculate the present value and the time and all that the long way, as opposed to just utilizing the chart?
To be safe, I'll say yes. The formulas aren't that hard, you know.
No, because I would have found a pre-recorded, I guess, class where they was going through the formulas and stuff like that. And at that time, the lecturer was advising the class to use the long way and only use the chart just to test or reconfirm. And I just wanted to know if that.
Do you want me to go over the formulas? I mean,
It is asking your opinion. If you don't think we need it, then I don't need to go through it. That's fine. It's asking.
And this is why, see, when I sat the exam, they allowed me to take in a financial calculator. The only two formulas you really need to memorize is the future value formula and the future value of an annuity formula. Why do I say that? because the present value in each of those circumstances is just 1 over that formula. You got me?
That's fine. So we don't need to, in no way, like learn how to calculate the number of periods or stuff like that.
Well, I mean,
I just asking.
no, I mean, the number of periods to me, I won't tell you no for your own edification. I'll tell you yes. Let's just say, take for instance, if they give you a question and they said that the annual interest rate is 10% annually, right? But they want you to, but they tell you interest is compounded monthly. What would you do with that information? Let's say the interest, the annual interest rate is 10%, 10% for 5 years. Interest compounded monthly. What would you do as part of, in terms of determining the number of periods and the interest rate, Mr. McKinney?
Would I divide the interest rate by 12 for 12 months?
Patronel, I think you have a television on in your background.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. No, don't mute yourself. Just cut down the TV.
No, sorry, I mute myself so I can ask someone to cut down the TV. Yeah.
Okay.
Would
Now-
you divide? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I need to listen to you.
No, I was asking, would we divide the interest by, I know you said monthly, so would it be by 12 to get the period? Well, for 12 periods?
No, well, no. Yes, you'll divide the interest by 12 to get the prorated monthly interest rate.
Okay.
But there's another step. That doesn't get the period. That
You mean
gets the. Go ahead.
You mean simply converting multiplied by 12 the years by the compounded monthly, which is essentially 60 periods? Are you saying that?
That's exactly correct, Mr. McKinney. So when you have a question like that, when they give you the annual percentage rate, but the compounding period is less than a year, you always divide the interest by the compounding period and multiply the number of years by the compounding period. Does that make sense to you guys?
It does. It just, would they always give us the amount of years though? That was my question, because
Can you repeat that again?
Do you want me to repeat it or Mr. McKinney to repeat it?
No, you, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Whenever the compounding period is less than a year, you divide the interest by the compounding period. Say something that is compounded quarterly. You take the annual rate and divide it by 4. And then you multiply the time frame by the compounding period to get the number of periods. Let's just take 1 year at 10%.
Mhm.
You will divide the 10% by 4 and multiply the 1 year by 4.
Okay.
Now, Mr. McKinney, go back to your question.
No, I was asking, would there be a scenario where they don't give us a year? So if a question be like Johnny had,
Go ahead.
so Johnny had $10,000 invested for at 5%. How long would Johnny need to invest this $10,000 at 5% to get a future value of 50,000 or something like that? I'm just asking to see if we
No,
need to go that in
no,
detail.
because that was one of the sample questions I sent to you guys. In my experience, I've never seen a question like that. I would tell you guys, get a financial, you ain't gonna have the time to do that calculation. And they do, I will find out from Miguel if they allow financial calculators in the exam. Hold on one second. Miguel,
Yes.
Are you still in office?
No, I'm still here. I can see you. I'm in office.
Okay, but come on for a second, please.
All right.
Okay, Miguel, you're there?
I'm here.
Okay. A question came up with regards to knowing formulas for working out future value, present value, and then, you know, if given a question of certain things and they got to figure out the number of periods.
Okay.
Am I still correct in my assumption that financial calculator, you are allowed to take financial calculators into the exam?
Correct. Yes, you still will be allowed to carry out financial calculators. Now, if you could remember, I don't think there were not many questions on calculations.
No,
Did you remember your last exam?
Yeah, time don't allow for that. I mean,
Yeah.
Do they allow them to take in present the interest factor table?
Yes, they can take it. They can take the tables and they can take the future value present formulas. That's not a problem.
That's good.
Okay, Mr. McKinney, does that give you a greater level of satisfaction or,
that's good.
comfort? Okay. You time does not allow you to go through
Yeah,
any
exactly.
mammoth calculations in this exam. And I
Will
must
we
say,
be-
no, go ahead.
Will we be able to get samples of like a mock exam or something like that?
Yeah,
Maybe later on after this happens?
I do have a paper mock exam, and they're supposed to be formulating an online one. So hopefully before the end of your module 6, you'll have a mock exam to get an idea.
All right, cool.
While we have Miguel, are there any other questions y'all need to ask Miguel while he's on? Don't be bashful. You're paying your money for this.
Any particular
exam.
day? Oh,
Yeah,
go
in
ahead.
March.
In March with the exam.
Pardon me?
Is there any particular day the exam is
No.
set in?
Once this course is completed, I will submit your names to Charter Banker. They will give you a membership, and once you log in, you will select a date and time for your exam. You will be doing your exam in your home on your computer. So please ensure that you have a working microphone and camera. Okay, and up-to-date desktop. You will be doing your exam in your home, but you will pick a date when you book your exam, a date and time.
It has to be in March.
No, it doesn't have to be in March. I think you have up to about 4 to 5 months.
Okay.
Oh, that's good time to study.
Okay.
All right, that's it, guys.
Well, anything else, just give me a shout. I'm here. I'm going nowhere.
Okay, well, we're signing off for the night now.
Okay.
Okay, so guys, remember class is next Wednesday. Okay?